Hi guys, this is jsandon.com and I'm here with the Motorola Moto M for a full review. This is a metal mid-ranger that fits between the Moto G and the Moto Z handset. It was launched in November 2016 and it bears the Lenovo identity through its design in a more powerful way than the other Motorola phones. So it's priced at around $250 and in India it has a special version with a different CPU. Anyway, it competes with the Huawei Nova and the Asus Zenfone 3 and it cuts some corners in the CPU department. So the design involves a metal unibody approach, not very far from what we got on the Huawei Nova series. For example, it's got a solid build, a pretty okay weight considering the 5.5 inch format, but the overall format is rather generic and we've seen it before. When it comes to the buttons, they're quite comfy, these ones on the side. And when it comes to one-hand use, not bad for a 5.5 incher. Now, if you're wondering about the measurements, it measures 7.9mm in thickness, which by the way is the exact same waistline of the Galaxy S7 and weighs 163 grams, which means this phone is 3 grams heavier than the Huawei Nova Plus and about 8 grams heavier than the Asus Zenfone 3, the 5.5 incher. It's comfy, it's got a rounded back, and it's got spill and splash resilience, plus it's available in gold, in gray and silver. It's pretty nicely worked and nicely designed, but in the end it's a rather typical format. Okay, so now as far as the screen is concerned, I keep saying it's a 5.5 incher. It's a Full HD screen with an IPS LCD panel, and since we do not have a video player, I'm going to go ahead and use photos to play our test video. So here we go, this is our test video. And the conclusions are that we're dealing with a crisp and bright screen with wide view angles, pretty nicely calibrated colors, and the contrast was rather okay in the sunlight, no objections there. Now let's go to the other areas of testing. This is the pixel arrangement here, RGB stripes under the microscope, and we also did a lux meter test and achieved 406 lux units, which is rather okay, and it beats the Sony Xperia Z3 and HTC One M9 for example, but scores below the Xperia XA, iPhone SE and HTC One A9. Now we also have settings for said screen, but don't expect anything out of the ordinary. We got brightness level, adaptive brightness, we got a color mode with options like standard or vibrant, and then we have wallpaper, sleep, daydream and font size plus gas. So overall an okay display for a mid-range phone. Now it's time to talk about other aspects, and by other aspects we mean the CPU. So this version has the MediaTek Helio P10 octa-core chipset, while the Indian version has the Helio P15. The phone comes with 3 or 4 GB of RAM of the LPDDR3 kind and 32 or 64 GB of storage, as well as a micro SD card slot. Luckily, we found no trace of lag, so you can pick any app you want. It opens up and starts up pretty fast, works fine, no delay, no lag, and no problem. You can have multiple apps queued, you'll notice no hiccup. Now, as far as the games are concerned, we play Riptide GP Renegade, which is our benchmark game, and it worked out fine. All the frame rate is there, lighting is good, the textures are okay. So gaming checks out. You can already hear that the sound is quite strong with this one. So let's pick a quick race and give it a go. Okay, so here we are in the gaming section. You can already tell by the loading time we're dealing with quite a good phone. Nice looking water, good color effects, no hiccup, no delay, no stutter, and let's do a stunt. Okay, so that's about it. Gaming checks out. Now it's time for the benchmarks. Okay, so I talked about benchmarks, so let's see them. Going to have to go to the screenshots area. So as usual, we did the battery of tests that involve a Quadrant and Antutu in the works, and in Quadrant, for example, we beat the Samsung Galaxy A5 2016 as well as the AllView P9 Energy, but scored below the LG V10 for example. Now in Antutu 6, that's the score we got. At least we beat the Sony Xperia XA and Motorola Moto G4, which we expected, but we scored below the Asus Zenfone 3 and the Huawei Nova. Now, as far as the gamers benchmark goes, this one is 3D Mark, Ice Storm Unlimited, and that's the score which I was also expecting. Basically, it's above the HTC One A9 and the AllView X4 Soul, but below the Huawei Honor 7. It's okay-ish for a mid-ranger. It certainly beats the Sony Xperia XA and the Motorola Moto G4 and scores below the Asus Zenfone 3 as expected. So not exactly a powerhouse, but also not exactly weak, probably because we get at least 3GB of RAM, not 2 like the Xperia XA. Anyways, we also tested the temperature, and this is what came out: 38.3 degrees Celsius when running the game you saw before, that Riptide game, and 34.8 degrees Celsius when running the intensive benchmark GFX bench, so there's no overheating here. Time to discuss other aspects like the battery, for example. So on this phone we have a 3050 mAh battery, lithium polymer, should offer fast charging at 5 volts and 2 amperes. So we start off with the video playback time, and we achieved a pretty underwhelming 6 hours and 48 minutes, which is superior to the HTC One M9 but inferior to the Huawei Honor 8 and Honor 7. Now we also did a PC mark test, which is a bit more relevant. It's continuous usage after all. 6 hours and 6 minutes, which is just okay and beats the LG G5 and Sony Xperia M5, but scores below the Huawei P9 Lite, for example. In the meantime, its biggest rivals, the Asus Zenfone 3 and the Huawei Nova, have an extra 3 or 4 hours in both sections. Now the charging of this phone is done in 5 minutes to reach 3%, 15 minutes to reach 14%, and 30 minutes to reach 31%. 1 hour gives you 65%, and the full charge requires 1 hour and 51 minutes. Anything below 2 hours is good, so that checks out rather fine. Now we also have options for set battery, pretty straightforward, battery saver and battery optimization, so that's about it. In the end, a mixed battery with, let's say, a reasonable PC mark and an underwhelming video playback, and also pretty good charging. Now when it comes to acoustics, we may have two grills, but only the right one is for the speaker. There is Dolby Atmos here in the form of an app, which can also be accessed from the Google Play Music application, and it offers options like movie, music, game, voice and custom, with a few tweaks for volume, dialogue, virtualizer and more. Time to listen to some tunes and judge for ourselves if the speaker is any good or not, and surprise, it's actually very good. Okay, so you probably figured out that it's a very loud speaker. It has crisp notes, also good bass, and the voice and keys are excellently rendered here. It's finally a pleasant surprise for a change. Okay, time for the decibel meter testing, so let's go to photos again and find it. And here we are. This is the first score, 83.8 decibels, achieved with your typical audio sample, and when playing the game you saw before, which is Riptide GP Renegade, surprised a huge and enormous 99.2 decibels, which would place this probably at the top of all the phones we've measured lately at least, so that's very impressive and almost a record breaker, the loudest I've heard for sure over the past year or half a year. Anyways, headphones. Also get these headphones bundled with a device. They're rather small and frankly they kept dropping from my ear. That's something to remember because they're very small. They have a pretty thick wire, so that's nice for protection, and a pretty ugly remote. The experience involved, well, a pretty reasonable volume, a reasonable bass as well, and the isolation of the noise was decent. We also have FM radio in case you were wondering, and it's right here. Okay, we're done with the acoustics. We're uber happy about it, especially with the volume. Time to go to the cameras. So 16 megapixel shooter here, f2.2 aperture. There's also face detection autofocus and a dual tone flash here. The front 8 megapixel camera for the selfies with a beautification option, and let's close these apps and see just how fast the camera app gets activated. Here we go. Took a bit of a while, but not exactly huge, and unlike the Moto Z and Moto G custom stock Android experience, this one has a dedicated camera app, which we also saw on the Lenovo phones. It's no coincidence because Motorola belongs to Lenovo. Now the actual experience involves, let's see, so okay, start speed. I would say that the picture taking speed is also reasonable. fluid zoom, but the focus is a bit on the slow side, and even though in this video it may seem like fast, you should always wait and be patient for the proper pic to be taken, otherwise it's moved. Options include a Pro mode, panorama, R-Nightscape and effects. We also have HDR and a few settings that are rather generic, frankly speaking. Aspect, the resolution isn't even detailed in numbers. Snap mode, white balance, ISO, you can film up to full HD, and some extra options here. So as you can see, nothing fancy, and the front camera brings some beautification features. Now we go to the gallery because I'm sure you want to see our pics, and we have quite a few of them, so let's see how many. Quite a few. Okay, so let's start off with the daytime shots. It was early March on a pretty sunny day, 18 degrees Celsius or so. Anyways, a regular shot and HDR shot, making everything whiter but still clear. And in general I felt that the clarity was rather okay, but sometimes the colors felt a bit washed out. These are some shots, and I was surprised by how good the selfie is. The texture of the face, the hair and the color is excellent. You can even ignore the background, that's how good the face is. And also we took some very nice close-ups. I like the color, the clarity and the texture of objects. However, while the close-ups are good, the landscape shots were not that good. You lose details, things get washed out, and the colors are not exactly impressive. Some focus and dynamic range fumble here and there, and sometimes the shots felt a bit darker than I expected. These are some colorful toys, and believe me, in real life they were even more colorful. That's why I keep saying that the shots are washed out. We also took a panorama with a reasonable resolution of 8496 over 864 pixels with good clarity, and one thing to remember is that zooming in results in detail loss on this phone, and the colors need to be more vivid. In the end, the clarity was good, the selfies were excellent, and so were the close-ups, and if the dynamic range and colors check out, would be a better rival for the Asus Zenfone 3 and Huawei Nova. In the meantime, it's below them and can fight maybe a Huawei Honor phone like the Honor 7 or older models. Now this is the outdoors shot, series of shots. We also took some indoors, and boy, we were disappointed. They're moved, you zoom in, you lose details, and even in close-ups, I'm not very happy with the results. Like this plate of pasta looks very dull, moved and blurry. You use the flash and give it more life, but still could have been a bit better, and once again washed out. Now let's see what happens during the night, which frankly speaking was not exactly bad. The streetlight halos had okay size, the clarity was good, the flash was actually surprisingly good, and when you start to zoom in, there's a bit of grain obviously. We like the built-in texture, there's some blur in the distance, but overall I am pretty happy with the results achieved during the night time. Streetlight halos were reasonable, the colors were quite decent, good lighting, in spite of the official specs saying that this is a rather normal aperture, something like f2.0. And for a mid-ranger, I would say it gets a thumbs up. It can fight the Huawei P9 Lite, for example, on equal terms, but still slightly below the Asus Zenfone 3 and the Huawei Nova. We're done with the pics, time to check out the videos. We shot in Full HD MP4, 30 frames per second and 70 megapixels per second, and let's check out the clips. So we got a pretty okay exposure change. The details in the distance aren't very impressive, they fade out. If you zoom in, you certainly lose details. The colors are once again washed out. Some dynamic range problems here as well, but at least the focus was good, so no problem there. We wanted more color, that's why we filmed the toys. The microphone felt a bit echoey here, I was probably covering it up, although there are two microphones on board. Reasonable colors this time around, good clarity, lighting and focus. Also stabilization is, I would say, okay, and that's it. And one more vid, and it's this one. Full HD once again, MP4. It could fight maybe the Huawei mid-rangers that have been known not to film very good. It also beats the Motorola Moto G4 and pretty much fighting the Huawei P9 Lite, for example. So that's the daytime video. We also have nighttime video, and let's check that out. Possibly the biggest surprise of them all was the fact that this phone can actually handle the night. It may be 24 frames per second and this time 14 mega per second or 17 mega per second, but somehow it can handle the pressure. That's another video. The microphone may not face the wind, but the clarity is good, colors are okay, even the lighting checks out, halos are reasonable. There may be some blue hue on top of the image, but we've seen much worse. That's why I am actually pretty impressed by this thing. Not bad stabilization, colors, lighting and focus. It can fight the Huawei Nova and all the Huawei's that are mid-rangers, I would say easily, and maybe even the Zenfone 3, but only at night and only if you had smaller expectations. So this is it about the camera. Some surprises, excellent close-ups and selfies, but other than that, nothing to remember. Now it's time to go to the web browser and we're dealing with Chrome here, so let's load up gsm.com. As you can see, taking its sweet time to load. I would say that the speed is reasonable, not more than that. And in the end, the Velamo benchmark for the browser result was okay, but SunSpider was not exactly impressive. Now that the web browsing checks out, we got a virtual keyboard here, which is the stock one, and it also includes swipe. Now, as far as connectivity goes, this one is a dual SIM phone with dual nano SIM card slots, and the second nano SIM card slot can also receive a micro SD. We got an USB Type-C port at the bottom with OTG support. There's Bluetooth 4.1, we have two microphones, we also have GPS and GLONASS and LTE category 6, which means up to 300 Mbps downloads. There's FDD LTE and TDD LTE, as well as Wi-Fi A, B, G and AC, and just in case you were wondering, there's no NFC here. The calls are pretty loud, pretty clear, nothing exactly out of the ordinary. After all, Motorola invented the mobile phone, so it would have been crazy to see the calls suck on this phone. Now, when it comes to the connectivity, we did a bunch of speed tests and this is what we achieved. So we achieved the values of up to 247 Mbps download via Wi-Fi, 25 Mbps upload, which is quite fine, and on 4G, 62 Mbps download, 45 Mbps upload, so overall within the normal range of such tests that we did on other devices. So this checks out and it's time to address the software experience. So Motorola Moto M runs on Android 6.0 Marshmallow. It's got a clean and stock interface and experience, much like the Moto Z and the Moto G. So we got the carousel for the multitasking, as you can see here. If you keep the home screen pressed, you can trigger the wallpapers, widgets and settings, all of them stock except for this time and weather widget. Drop down section includes notifications and quick settings, also typical. We have a special home screen for the Google Now area with the typical options here, reminders, customize, searches and all that. Then we go to the settings where we don't find anything fancy, maybe except for the Motorola privacy, and that's about it. We also have a fingerprint scanner here, which we're going to put to the test right about now. So let's go to security, fingerprint, continue, set up screen lock, pin. We've done this 1,000 times and have to say that we're dealing with a pretty solid fingerprint scanner here, but let's put it to the test. Okay, so we find the sensor, we get ready, and this one is a 12-step setup. It's registering my print and we're done. Now it's time to unlock the phone using our fingerprint. We lock it and here we go. Put the finger here, it's unlocked. Just how fast it happens, like this. So instant, accurate and speedy. When it comes to the pre-installed applications, I counted them all. There are 25 of them, which means there's no bloater. It's just the bare minimum provided by Google. We got Photos, we got Gmail, we got Play Music and Chrome. There's Drive, there's a file manager here, Gmail, Hangouts, the works. So 25 is an excellent number to have and the interface is quite fluid. Now it's time for the verdict. This is the Motorola Moto M, and on the Pro side we got a solid build. This one has a very loud acoustic experience. It can take some pretty solid close-ups and selfies. The screen is quite okay, brightness wise, color wise, and it can also film pretty well. I'm back to the camera. It doesn't have any lag, the games look mighty fine, and it's got a clear and clean UI and OS. So those are the pros. Now on the con side we find the fact that the battery should have been a bit better, maybe by 3 or 4 hours. judging by what the Huawei Nova Plus and the Zenfone 3 offered. The camera UI is rather limited. I wanted more options and maybe more settings and tweaks. I find that some of the shots were out of focus and washed out. Indoor shots were totally underwhelming. There's no Android Nougat here, and the benchmarks weren't exactly impressive, but in the end reasonable for a mid-ranger. So this remains a solid rival for the Samsung Galaxy A5 2016, for the Asus Zenfone 3 and the Huawei Nova Plus. However, unlike them, it comes with a clean and clear Android Marshmallow experience that hasn't been tweaked, which may be a nice thing. It doesn't have bloatware, and it has an excellent acoustic setting here, an acoustic setup. Takes nice selfies and close-ups, and the battery is probably the only big drawback here. So when it fights the models we mentioned, it triumphs thanks to the software rather than the hardware. But the hardware ain't that bad, especially judging by the audio side. So in the end, it's a very important Huawei P9 Lite rival, but it can also fight other higher mid-range phones. This has been the review of Motorola Moto M here at gsndom.com. Bye bye!